Okay, good evening. I guess everybody's here, and I just finished going over and grading your third assignments. Okay, I am quite uh, pleased by most of them because your review of literature is extensive, and I did make comments with regards to your hypothesis, your theory, and your econometric model, which I'll have to be explaining this evening. Okay. Most of you already have a clear econometric model, but some don't have a straightforward theory. Yeah, a theory upon which um, your econometric model was based. Your econometric model was focused on. Okay. And also, I'd like to point out that uh, there are a lot of uh, format rules that have not been followed. And format is very important in writing a research paper in economics, in writing the dissertation. It's a certain discipline that you have to learn now so that it becomes part of you, as part of your professional training, so that when you write technical papers in the future, automatically you follow these format rules and the like. And I'll get to that in a while. Okay. So I'll begin by going over uh, what was expected and what the full paper is supposed to be like. We will not have a synchronous meeting until, if I understand, sometime in April, when you've all submitted your first draft. Okay, so just a minute. Let me check. Yes, our next synchronous meeting is 26th April when you submit your first draft, and this would be more or less in preparation for your for your presentation. Okay. Now, if you do not submit your first draft on the 26th of April, I will presume that you're planning to take an incomplete grade. So you plan on completing it sometime in April 2020. When I hope we would have already met face to face. You always have to keep on hoping. Okay, so anyway, so that would be the work that would be a schedule. But in any case, the uh, the next synchronous class, 26th April, will involve my my discussing with you how to go about your presentation. Okay, how to choose your reader and how to go about your presentation and the like. Okay. So for this evening, okay, I will just go over what would have been chapter 3 and the rest of the paper. Okay. So you're supposed to have submitted your conceptual framework, which is the choice of theory and empirical model, and also the statement of the hypothesis. Now, again, let me repeat that the hypothesis, okay, is again like a just a minute. Um, there. Okay. All right. So, so the hypothesis is supposed to be a simple sentence, okay, where the verb is increase, decrease, and the dependent variable is your topic. Okay, that's your topic. Which is why if you mention that your topic is poverty, then it would be that something increases or decreases poverty. It's not poverty increases something else. No. If poverty really is your topic, then it has to be the dependent variable. So something increases or decreases poverty. Well, that's actually a research question. Okay? What makes it a hypothesis would be that the dependent and independent variables are now expressed in terms of the data that you use in trying to study the topic. Okay? So you might therefore say education decreases poverty. So you'd say increased public education expenditures decrease the poverty incidence. Okay, poverty incidence is the actual data that can measure poverty. Of course, there are very many others. Okay, you can Gini coefficient. It's a measurement of relative poverty. You can put in infant mortality rates. It's another indicator of poverty. Also, you can mention underemployment. Okay, so that's the difference between the hypothesis and your research question, where the hypothesis, your variables are now stated in terms of the data that you actually use to measure it and undertake your econometric testing. Okay. So in other words, the hypothesis is that operationalization of your variables. Operationalization means the conversion of the variable into something that is measurable. Okay, so you'd have say poverty and it's operationalized as infant mortality rates, poverty incidence, Gini coefficient, or the self-rated poverty. Okay, and the hypothesis states the relationship and expected result. So the relationship is that education decreases poverty. The expected result is that there will be a negative relationship between poverty and education. Okay, so with greater levels of education, it's supposed to reduce poverty, and it's expressed in your hypothesis. Let's say educational expenditures decrease poverty incidence or infant mortality rates or underemployment. Now, in terms of methodology, you have the conceptual framework, which shows you the choice of theory and the empirical model. Now, the choice of theory is that uh, among the theories that you have gone over in your review of literature, there was that one theory that you decided to focus on. Okay? And that's why, by the way, many of you have submitted very extensive reviews of literature, and you have submitted the proposed theoretical framework. And of course, you can still change because I've already pointed out some elements there that might need some modification, revision, or clarification. Okay. So when you have a theory, the theory is one of those that you encountered, which you discussed in your reviewed literature, the theoretical issues, and you've chosen to focus on one conclusion of this theory. And this theory you now present here, and you don't present the entire theory anymore because much of that is already in chapter 2. But what you would present would be just that part of the theory where you have that conclusion from which you obtain your hypothesis. Okay. And just a minute. And you just focus on that part of the theory. And the theory must have a mathematical model. And the mathematical model should go as far as the first order conditions in terms of establishing and explaining if the relationship between among the variables is positive or negative. Okay, because yes, those are the first order conditions. Okay. Now, the empirical model is now the econometric model that you've chosen to run. Again, this empirical model would be one of those that appear in your chapter 2 reviewed literature on methodological or empirical issues. Okay. But here in chapter 3, you now present the econometric model that you intend to run, in which case this econometric model will be an adaptation of the original. Okay. And you'll have to explain the adaptations that you made. So for example, um, when you're talking about, say, factors about the increase or decrease in poverty, you would have decided to use the econometric model that was developed in the United States of America, and one of the independent variables explaining poverty there would be race. Okay, because of course of the widespread perception that a person's race plays a significant role in the person's prospects for poverty or improving his or her economic standing. Okay. Now, you cannot use that here in the Philippines. It's not that we are not racist. On the contrary, we are very racist. The thing, though, that makes it different is apart from the difference in our experience of race relations, we actually do not collect data on race. We hardly ever collected data on race, and we never asked people to identify their particular race. Race does not play that big a role in our society here. The color of the skin often, yes, but not the race. Now, it's said though that here in the Philippines there's a possibility that religion and ethnicity might play the same role that race does in the USA. And there are data. We do collect data on religion and on ethnicity. Okay. So these are the adaptations that you might need to explain when you're doing this. Okay. Now, when you're talking about the plan of the study is pretty straightforward. I have given you here. This is already the outline, and that is the outline, the standard outline for thesis. Okay, and then data collection and processing. Right now, you're not expected to generate primary data. You're not expected to generate your own data. So you're not expected to do any survey, participant observation, content analysis, or case studies. Your main data collection will involve the downloading of secondary data. Okay. And the quantification and verification of economic relationships, that is actually your econometric model. And then the analysis and interpretation of results, presentation of results in report writing. We'll be discussing that in greater detail later on. At this stage, you still cannot do this yet because I don't think any of you have done any econometric rounds. Okay, so let's go over the expected outcome for your chapter 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so here, chapter 2, excuse me, excuse me, it's an allergy. Hmm. Now, review of literature is usually the longest chapter, and it's really a summary of all the research that you did, presenting all the background information insofar as your topic is concerned. But chapter 3, theoretical framework, that is your paper. Okay, so you begin by stating the hypothesis. I've already discussed with you what the hypothesis is, and then you discuss your theoretical framework. Okay. And then the methodology is the presentation of the econometric model. Okay. And data sources will be discussed here, where the data were obtained. Now, when you already write your final paper, I mean, not final, the first draft, by that time, you would have already run your regressions. Okay, you've already done this, which means that among other things, there'll be revisions in your chapter 2 and your chapter 3 theoretical framework, revisions from what you just submitted. Okay. Among the many revisions is that when you submit your first draft, you no longer will need to discuss in separate sections variables in operationalization, data requirements and sources, strategies, analytical tools. You don't need to present them in those sections because they are now to be presented in a much simpler form, where you now just have your theoretical framework, methodology, and then your data sources. And you are expected to, when you present it, it's already in the past tense. Okay. Now, for your assignments this evening, I've already gone through them, I've already graded them and given my comments. Okay. Of course, all of you there will mention that this paper will use this model, will use, okay, fine, because you are still going to be doing it. However, when you submit your first draft, it should all be in the past tense because you've already done it, you've completed it, okay? So once you've gone through the, I'm sorry, it should be A, hypothesis, B, theoretical framework, C, methodology, D, data sources, okay? Some would just say conceptual framework, and the conceptual framework presents the theory and the econometric model, but that's just fine. Okay. Now let's go over with analysis. Chapter 4 is the analysis. Okay, so we'll have here the first part is the discussion of data and results. Okay. Now, the section presents statistical description of the data used in the regression analysis. By statistical description, you present here the descriptive statistics of your data. So if your data are cross-sectional data or panel data, you'd have to present the usual mean, the mean, standard deviation, lowest value, highest value, okay, median, okay. If your data would time series or for the panel, it would have, say, growth rates, trends, okay, growth rates per decade, and the like. Okay, so a pure description of the data that was used in your regression. And then B, analysis of results. Here, you present your results. Okay. Nowadays, as I've discussed with you previously, there are now many econometric models that have 26 regressors, okay, and 300 to 1,000 observations that can already be done given computing capacity nowadays. So usually what will happen in the analysis of results is that you have the table there which presents the results with the estimated coefficients, and it will indicate the levels of significance of the results. Okay. If you're to use Stata or Gretel, they already would indicate the level of significance of the estimated results by putting an asterisk. If there's one asterisk, it's significant at 10%, two asterisks, significant at 5%, three asterisks, significant at 1%. And you know that it's the 5% and most especially the 1% levels of significance that are the most important consideration. Okay. Now, before you actually explain the results, then you'll have to go as well through the diagnostics. Okay. You have to explain their results of the heteroskedasticity test, autocorrelation, if you did any co-integration test, variance inflation factor, if you did panel data regression, then you had either fixed effects or random effects. You'll be discussing the diagnostics. Okay, Dr. De Guzman especially particular about that. He wants the paper to go through the diagnostics first and explain so that in the end we can be certain of the validity of the results. Okay, so that once you've gone through a discussion of your diagnostics, then you can now explain which of the variables were significant and which were not. Okay. How do they compare with the econometric model that you adapted it from? Okay, so that's a very, very good way of starting analysis by comparing it with the results there. Okay. And then in the appraisal of the theoretical framework, now that you've gone through the analysis of your results and the like, now here in the appraisal of the theoretical framework, you now discuss the implications of your results, implications in terms of policy. Okay, you know that there could very well be some existing proposals, or might be already existing policies. Okay, do your results suggest what policies might need to be revised or nullified or continued? Then when it comes to theories, okay, you've gone through several theories, but you've chose to focus on one, at most two. How well did this theory explain your results? And would you suggest the use of other theories? Okay, especially since the other theories, you would know them because they're in your review. Then when it comes to methodological issues, then how worthwhile was the econometric model that you used? How valid was it? Would you suggest the use of other econometric models? Would you suggest the inclusion of additional variables? And it's also here where you will suggest what data you think the government should also consider collecting. It's a recommendation for data collection agencies, government, partly to help improve uh, the data collection of government. Okay, that's one of the historical roles of theories of thesis was that they're also supposed to provide feedback and send them to the data collection agencies so that the data collection agencies can use these feedback as advice on how to further improve their data collection, refining their methodologies and the like. Okay, so this is how you do your chapter 4. Now, in practice, when you do your econometrics, okay, you actually make several runs. You make this first run, you go through all the diagnostics, and then if there's heteroscedasticity, you make some modifications, and then you make another run. Again, you go over the diagnostics, and then you decide on this particular set of results. Okay, so that's it. In that particular trial that you made, which may have been the sixth time, if you're just lucky, kasi madali na ngayon ang mag-compute, isang click lang, ayos, may bago na namang resulta, which is why you can do your econometric runs several times, 10, 12 times or so. Unlike noon, nang hina-hina pa ng computing capacity, 2 or 3 runs, ang dami na. Okay, but now you can make several runs. So, once you've chosen a particular set of results, okay, now here's the thing. I'd advise you to focus on those set of results when you present your analysis of results. Just present that, make its discussion. But then you make a separate write-up that you'll place in the appendix where you discuss all the different runs that you made, what the results were, and why you decided to make some changes, modifications, and why you ended up using these particular set of results. Okay, just place them in the appendix. Okay. There are some readers like Dr. De Guzman who actually would rather that you present in the analysis of results this discussion of all the different runs that you did, all the different runs that you made, and the like. Whereas I would rather you just present the main results, and everything else you can place it in the appendix. But you, as far as I'm concerned, you follow what your reader tells you. So if your reader says, write down all the steps that you took, including the modifications and like, well, then it's very easy. It's just a case of cutting and pasting from your appendix and placing it in the body. As far as I'm concerned, just for purposes of fulfilling the maximum number of 50 pages, okay, just write it in the appendix. Okay, and here in the body, just focus on those sets of results that you finally chose to present. Okay. Now let's go over the conclusions. Okay. Chapter 5. Okay. Now can you just give me 2 or 3 minutes, please? Okay. Okay, now chapter 5. Chapter 5 is the shortest chapter in the entire paper. Okay, just as a word of rule of thumb. Okay, chapter 5 is the shortest. Okay, next shortest is your chapter 1, and chapter 1 is the last that you write. Okay, so do not copy paste your first assignment and make it chapter 1. No, chapter 1, you need some modification now because you have to explain what you did in the paper. Okay, so you made a statement of the research question, in which case you would need to make some modification perhaps from your original research question, because the research question here now is the statement of the hypothesis that you ran in more general terms. Okay. Then the significance of the research question is a summary of your chapter 2, section A, the review of policy issues. In other words, you're discussing the fact that your research question involves an issue of current social and economic concern. It's a real social problem to this day. It may have been persisting for 50 years, even 100 years, but it still is a real social problem for today. Okay. For scope and limitations here, you just state the author or authors of the theory and theories and the econometric model that you've chosen to focus on. Then you identify the variables as identified in your theoretical framework, and the other variables identified in chapter 2, section B, reviewed theoretical issues, okay, which are not included in the analysis. That would be the limitations. When you therefore say the scope here would be Harris and Todaro, and the econometric model by Ravenstein, which focuses on these variables. The limitations are that you will not be discussing certain variables which you mentioned, because these variables were not covered by your theory or by your econometric model, but they were covered in the other theories and econometric models. Okay. Methodology is just a summary of chapter 3, section C, where you mentioned that the particular paper uses panel data regression using the model of so and so, and the data used to see. It can be in just 3 sentences or so. And the definition of terms here represents the operationalization of the variables. Okay, so you just discuss your independent and your dependent variable and what data was used to measure them. Okay, so for example, definition of terms is poverty refers to the poverty incidence data, which is obtained from the Family Income and Expenditure Survey, available since 1985, every 3 years. Okay. Yeah. Now, chapter 5 is the shortest chapter. A rule of thumb is that chapter 1 and chapter 5 are the 2 chapters where there are no tables, graphs, charts, figures, or mathematical equations. There are none of those. Okay, they're all in chapters 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and by the way, in chapter 4, when you have a table of results and the like, you no longer put source below. Okay, source, you'd have to do that in chapters 2 and 3. Okay? When you have, say, data, then source or source of basic data, world development indicators, and the like. But in chapter 4, your tables of data would be the results of your econometric run. So effectively, you're the one who generated that data. So you no longer need to identify the source. When you don't write down the source, it means that the table there, you generated it. And in fact, you did. It came from your econometric runs. Okay? Now, Chapter 5, Conclusions, Part A, Summary. Summary here is a summary of Chapter 4, Section B, meaning to say a summary of the analysis of the results. Then conclusions would represent a summary of Chapter 4, Section C, which is the appraisal of your theoretical framework. And your recommendations for further research, this is important. This is now where you write down what you can recommend future researchers to do. Say, you might mention that in your research, some topics have not yet been thoroughly studied here in the Philippines or in Indonesia. Okay. So you're suggesting that research here be done, be continued, or you might suggest that future researchers might use the other econometric models and these data, the like. Okay. And afterwards, you have your bibliography and appendices. Okay. Now, bibliography, please, you need this early when you make your bibliography. Try and follow the University of Chicago style manual. Okay. If you follow the University of Chicago style manual, you no longer put parentheses on years. There are no quotation marks on titles of articles and the like. Only the titles of books, journals, and working paper series number, discussion paper series number. These are the only ones that are italicized. Okay. The only thing that's underscored or underlined would be the websites that you access, where you also include the date by which you access them. Okay. Now, in your appendices, two important elements in the appendices is that number one, I already mentioned to you your discussion of how you did your econometric runs. The other one is that you're supposed to present here in the appendix the data that you used in your regression. You present them there. But when the data are too huge, like for example, you got 3,000 observations from the like, you can at least discuss in the appendix, you can mention there the code for the data and how that data can be accessed and what data codes you use. Okay. The idea here is that by providing the data or at least the access codes in case you have a huge data set, is that future researchers can replicate the work that you did. That's always what one does in economic research. Your data should all be available to all readers, all future researchers so that they can replicate it. So do not ever, ever, ever do a research paper where you use confidential data. That's not allowed. Okay, because that would be unfair to future researchers. So only those data that are available to the general public may be used. Okay, and also additional data in the appendix would be those data that were used in your review of literature and the policy issues. Again, keep in mind, what you present in the body would be tables, figures, charts, and illustrations that fit one page, which is why your data, you have to collapse it and analyze it. Okay? So all the other data you can present in the appendix. So you might want to present in your appendix, for example, data from 1960, 2020 for 10 Asian countries on their GNP, their GNP per capita, poverty incidence, education excellence. Okay, fine. So you have that in the appendix, but what you place in the body is a smaller version of that. So you might present data for the 6 ASEAN countries, or the 6 Asian countries, um, rather than 1960 to 2020 by decade. So the average GNP for 1960 to 69, 1970 to 79, and in which case it's a much smaller a table that can fit in one page. Okay. Format rules. The basic source is University of Chicago Style Manual, which you can access online. Now, I said 30 pages. Actually, I'm willing to go up to 50 pages. So 30 minimum, 50 maximum. Okay, the main body includes tables, figures, and charts, but not bibliography and appendices. Okay, and it's double spaced, font size at 12 points times New Roman. Some of you are still using Calibri when you make your assignments. Please get used to Times New Roman. Okay, font size 12 points. Okay, now again, so many of you are submitting your assignments with several subsections and several things that are bold. These are the only ones that are bold-faced. Okay? The chapter, appendix, headings, and titles, which are all caps. So you have chapter 1, introduction. Okay, chapter 1 on top, second line is introduction, all caps, bold. Okay, and then appendix heading, so appendix A1. Okay, data used in regression. So yun, appendix A1, data used in regression. Okay. And then titles of tables, figures, and charts are caps and lowercase and boldface. So table 2.2, caps and lowercase, bold. And then second line, selected economic indicators for 10 ASEAN countries. Bold, caps and lowercase. Okay. Then you have subsection headings, caps and lowercase. So you have review literature, on chapter 2 review. Then A, policy issues. B, theoretical issues. C, methodological issues. Yun lang ang subsection headings. Do not add anymore. Okay. Some of you, when you submitted your assignments before at saka tonight, you put in additional subsections, and then with the boldface, remove those. The only subsections are the ones indicated here. Ayan, no? Theoretical framework, methodology, data sources, policy, theoretical. Those are the only subsections. Okay. Then citations to use surname, year of work format. Say, Todaro and Smith, 2009. Harris and Todaro, 1967. Okay, Solo, 1956, or Romer, 1994. No. Okay, now, efforts. So yes, I've gone through chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, appendices, geography. I'm tired. I guess it's because of the heat. And I guess also the fatigue coming from more than 1 year of quarantine, still the uncertainty that's going to happen. Anyway, we keep on hoping. So anyway, let's go over the other important parts of the research paper. Okay, so when you submit your first draft, you have a title page. Okay, I put in some papers in Canva so that you can see there how title pages look like. Usually with the title page, the next page is a blank page. Okay. The title page and the blank page are both required. Now, I think the origin of the blank page is so that the title page will be clear. And if the paper were quite thin, then without the blank page, you might be able to see through to the next page. So that's why there's a blank page after the title page. Okay. Still is being done up to today, even though this is already online. Still, that's how it is. I'd like to think that by the time some of you start working on your thesis, okay, life would be quite normal already, so that you'll be submitting not just the online version of your paper, but also a hard copy. So we'll better get used to this format. Save the title page, and it is followed by a blank page. The next page is optional. It's called the dedication page. Okay. You can dedicate it to whoever. The only rule as far as dedication pages are concerned is that it should be just one, it should be 1 to 3 lines. 3 lines at most. You don't dedicate it to everyone who taught you since your preschool days. So anyway, that's the dedication page. And that is optional. After the dedication page, there's another section which is again optional. It's called the acknowledgements. So the acknowledgements. There you can list down and thank all the people you want to thank that helped you in your writing of your paper. Usually those especially who write their dissertations, whether MA, doctoral dissertations. You acknowledge so many people. Now, the one rule of thumb with acknowledgements is that there's a maximum of 2 pages. Okay. Again, Times New Roman, font size 12 points. In the acknowledgements, you have the acknowledgements, bold, center, write down people whom you'd like to thank. This is the one section where you can refer to yourself in the first person. I would like to thank so Ate Sai, Ate Ring, that sort. Okay. My parents. Right. Okay. So you have a title page, the blank page. Then you have your dedication page, which is optional. The acknowledgements, which is optional. But the next is required, and this is the abstract. So you have the abstract, all caps, and then you write down the abstract. The abstract is no more than 300 words. And in the abstract, you state your hypothesis, author of the theoretical framework econometric model used, brief description of the data used, okay, results and the implications in policy theory and methodology. You write it in the past tense as the paper is already completed. An abstract is very important because it is used by researchers really, so that if you'd like other researchers to have a look at your paper, if it turns out that they are in the same or similar topic, okay, you communicate it through your abstract. Okay? And all journals in economics do require the writing of the abstract. The idea is that it's a summary of what the paper is all about. Okay. In the United States of America, for example, we were all required that, well, it's the universities are always required to send to the Library of Congress all the all the doctoral thesis titles and abstracts for a given year, so that one can therefore begin with researching at the US Library of Congress. One can look at the topics and one can see the abstracts, and there's a link for you to be able to get to read those dissertations. They may not necessarily be in the Library of Congress, they would be in the university libraries. Okay. apparently Dr. Beha found mine. So apparently it does work. That's the importance of having an abstract. Okay. After the abstract, you now have the table of contents. Okay. And then you have your list of figures and list of appendices. Okay. Now here's how paging works. Page 1, Arabic numeral. Arabic numeral is this one, the regular numerals that we have. Page 1 Arabic numerals begins with page 1 of the introduction. And there's a maximum of 50 pages for the body. But before page 1 Arabic numerals, okay, all these sections have page numbers except for the title page. Okay. The page 1 is there for the blank page after the title page, but the page numbers here are lowercase Roman numerals. So if you have the optional paper, so the blank page is page 1, dedication page is page 2, acknowledgements is page 3, make it page 4 if you decided to complete the 2-page list of acknowledgements. Then you have abstract coming page 5. And then table of contents, list of figures, appendices. And these are all in lowercase Roman numerals, which is why in the table of contents, lalabas doon, dedication page, II, page 2, Roman numerals. Okay. Acknowledgements, triple I. Okay. Yeah. Abstract, lowercase v. Okay. So that's how page numbers are done. Okay. Your appendices can be thicker than 50 pages. Okay, you can. But your reader will be grading only the body of paper. Okay. All right. So, okay, any questions? I'm willing to entertain questions about the lecture and also about your individual papers, if you have any. Mhm. Again, I'll be posting a recording of this. Mhm. Well, we are told to plan for online teaching still in the first semester, in the coming school year, first semester and even second semester. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future because, these lectures, as you know, have been recorded and I've made them available. And I've downloaded the recording and they placed them on YouTube. So I suppose in the future I can make a YouTube link. That means I'm not anymore sure what to do with the synchronous meetings if I have recorded these anyway. For those of you who took up my class on urban economics, that's gonna happen. I do not know what we'll be doing in our synchronous classes since I've already recorded the lectures from last year. I'll be putting them online. So tinatamad na siguro ako. I'm already getting sick and tired of just staying at home and talking to a blank page. Okay, not knowing how people are doing. So that's why. Anyway, once Holy Week is over, I'll have my ice cream. I think I'll I feel much better. That's my abstinence for the Lenten season. I don't take any ice cream. I don't take any chocolates. That's my abstinence. Maybe that's the reason why I feel so lethargic. Okay, any questions? Your research pay, your assignments already returned with the grades. Okay. And I'll be awaiting your first drafts by April 26th. Okay, we'll have our next synchronous meeting, by which time I'll be discussing with you the method of doing your presentation. All right, so if there are no more questions, any questions or comments? So I suppose we could end here now. So I'll meet you again, 26th of April. I'll be posting a copy of the recording as usual. Okay. So I'm actually quite heartened by a lot of work that shown. Most of you have done a lot of research. Okay. My main comments in your papers, just please pay attention to the format. Okay. Because oftentimes, no matter how magnificent your content happens to be, you will not get a good grade simply because you did not follow the format. And format is very important in technical writing. All right, so good night. Thank you very much for, I've never mastered this Zoom here. I should, oh, there. Okay, good night. Okay, and thank you very much to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye. My pleasure. Sige.